Hello. So this is our second episode in Seek the Joy Live. We are going live with Vrin Rao to talk all about the Enneagram and its connection to joy. There's Vrin. Let me invite her on. Oops. Let's see. That is joining. I'm excited for today's conversation. It's going to be good. Okay, Vrin, I added you. Hopefully it works. Hello.
Hello.
I'm so glad it worked. I was like, kept pushing the button. I was like, please work. Oh my God. Please work. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Me too.
Talking all about the Enneagram, and I think it's connection to joy, but even beyond that, I think, and you and I talked a little bit about this before, but just it's connection to self-awareness and understanding yourself so much better. So I think this is a good time to sort of dive into that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel
So
like the
we'll give people,
Enneagram can't be separated from self-awareness, to be honest.
no, I don't think so either. I was just going to say we'll give people a couple of minutes to hop on and join, but I think I'd love to start. Tell us a little bit about you and tell
Sure.
us a little bit about how you found the Enneagram.
Yeah, um I'm now in, I feel kind of maybe this incarnation, or I can't say that because I feel like I think I found where my service is, to be honest. And that is, I'm an Enneagram coach and meditation teacher, but my background is actually biochem. So I have my bachelor's and my master's in biochem and went through this phase of knowing that that wasn't what I wanted to continue with, but at the same time, having no clue where to
Mm.
transition to. And so I took a coaching certification on the suggestion of my husband, not to become a coach, but really to equip myself with tools to understand myself better and to also to be of service. I feel like the tools that come with coaching, you don't need to be an actual coach to use those tools. It's just basic life skills, honestly, in terms of empathy, communication, listening, all of those wonderful
Mm-hmm.
things that we need more of in our lives. And so took the coaching certification. 25 minutes in, knew this is what I wanted to do. Went, oh no, this wasn't the plan. But that's, that's how sometimes these kinds of things happen. And
Mm-hmm.
came to the Enneagram honestly because the first person who introduced it to me was my husband. He had been studying it for 11 years prior to that. He was a monk and in the Bhakti yoga tradition. And as part of their training, he lived with 15 other monks in a monastery on the Upper East Side. And this was one of the tools they found was extremely, extremely helpful to understand what was the type of care and what each person needed, which is
Wow.
so important, right? Just because you're dedicating your life to a particular path doesn't mean that we don't always and continuously need care. And that care comes in different forms depending on the ego lens that we see the world through.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is such a cool story, and the way that you found the Enneagram is so, I don't know, just not what I think most people would expect. And I think that's what's so cool about all of our journeys in general is that you have these twists and turns along the way, and you never know how one thing will lead you to the next. So you touched on something though about having tools to be able to take care
Mm,
of yourself. And I know that for so many, the Enneagram exists really as this tool to know yourself. And if you're tuning in right now or later and you know your type, put it in the comments because I'm super curious. Um, because I think knowing your type, and obviously tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like knowing your type and being able to connect to those core fears and those core desires that the Enneagram speaks to, you can get a better sense of how to take care of yourself. And so I'm
absolutely.
curious, what has that journey looked like for you? And for anyone that's listening, like how can we start to incorporate the Enneagram as a tool to really tap into that? Because it's all about, at the end of the day, getting to know ourselves so we can access more joy, I think.
Absolutely. Yes. And I really appreciate, and it goes to show your own understanding of the Enneagram. And that is, you touched upon particular fears and needs and desires. Yes. And all of that is wrapped into motivation, right? And so,
Yeah.
understanding that is so powerful because without that, we are kind of like, we're just lost.
Hmm.
When we don't realize what's motivating us. And the crazy thing is, I know if you had asked me over 7 years ago, prior to me coming to the Enneagram, I would have probably said, yeah, I know what motivates me, not truly understanding what understanding my motivations really
Hmm.
means and being driven by them. And so when I first came to understand, oh wow, this is what drives me. Um, Honestly, it took a lot of time to make that practical, to actually see how that could change the way in which I reacted and showed up in life. So it stayed as a lot of theoretical knowledge for quite some time. And I think that's normal for many people. However, I think that also is dependent on our own level of awareness and consciousness, what we come in with in the beginning. And
Hmm.
I think that's the powerful piece to the Enneagram, that if we can just start to consistently and steadily, even if it's bit by bit, start to increase our level of awareness and consciousness, that is enough,
Mm.
actually. That is truly, truly enough. And then couple that in with knowing what really drives us, what are our needs and our fears. And then we have this very practical and tailored roadmap by which we can start to build on those things. And
Mm.
so my own journey has been one of, wow, really cool, really interesting, which I think a lot of people find in the very beginning, to this is hard work. And oh my God, this awareness thing means like 24/7, like every second of the day. That's a lot. That's hard work. Nobody
It's
told
really
me.
hard. I know, and I think what you said is so interesting is just beginning that level of awareness for yourself is enough. I think sometimes there's this misconception or this idea that we have to do so much in the self-development or personal development or wellness space. Like we've got to do all the things and do them all at once. But I think if we can start with exactly what you said of just having a level of awareness of how do I actually feel right now, I think that's enough. And I think it's about simplifying it. So I love that you said that because I think if there's anything, I mean, we've only been talking for like 5, 8 minutes, I don't know. But if there's anything anyone can take from that, I hope it's that is that what you're doing right now is enough. You don't have to try and stack on all these additional things, but you can if you want to. And you can if
Yes,
it aligns and
exactly.
it feels good to you.
Exactly. And then to bring the Enneagram into this, the
Hmm.
Enneagram can help us to, where should we start depending on the ego lens that we see the world through. Where can we start to focus that awareness? Because there are particular places which are our blind spots depending on that lens, which really colors everything that we experience, see, and intake into our lives. And so when I realize something is my blind spot, then, oh, right, I need to be putting more awareness here, as opposed to what I know I'm very guilty of, that if somebody were to just say, oh, yeah, become more aware, you start to put awareness to a place you're already pretty aware. You typically don't start off with your blind spots,
Hmm.
right? Because you
Hmm.
know it's hard, or because they're your blind spots and you don't even realize that they are.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting what you said about blind spots because we all have them. Like we all have something or a multitude of things that we're just not aware of, either of something we're afraid of, something that we resist, an aspect of ourselves that could exist as a block or something that's preventing us, I think, from moving forward. And then on the flip side, sometimes we're not even aware of the great things about ourselves, like our empathy and our compassion and our ability to connect with other people. And so I really have appreciated, I think, how the Enneagram helps to reveal all of those things. Because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's like the once you start to understand those aspects of yourselves, both the positive, negative, dark, light, whatever vocabulary I think you want to attach to it, it allows you to see yourself better. Because when you start to see yourself better, you're like, oh, I like those things. Oh, I don't
Right.
like those things. But sometimes we don't know that unless we allow ourselves, I think, the space and the opportunity to explore it.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that, whether we like those things or even we recognize we don't. Or
Mm-hmm.
the other thing, and I think maybe something in the middle, is that I need to learn to accept this, whether it is a gift or whether it is a challenge, because sometimes our gifts we don't really like, which is fascinating to even experience. We
Mm-hmm.
can understand, it's easier to understand that, oh, I don't like this challenge because it's very clear to me. But when we realize, oh, for example, some of the types on the Enneagram are very extroverted. At a certain point, somebody might feel like my extroversion is actually a major, major flaw. But to
Mm-hmm.
realize that it's in how you can control it instead of being controlled by it. That's what's needed. It's not about whether something is good or bad. It's about
Mm-hmm.
how you use it. That's the most important thing.
Hmm. That's a really interesting concept, how you use it. So I want to tie this back to joy, if we can,
Yeah.
because I think for a lot of us, we're coming up at 1 year. We're basically at 1 year of this
Mm-hmm.
pandemic and being in quarantine. And I think we've gone through waves where for a lot of us there was joy and then there was none, and then there's none again, and then there's joy again. And I think a lot of us are kind of in that cycle. And I know for me, and I'm curious what your experience is like too, as we approach 1 year for me of working from home, I have a lot of mixed emotions, and I didn't expect to have such a mixed bag of emotions that I find myself at times like just not feeling like myself or not feeling
Mm.
that connection to joy. And so, do you have any advice, I guess, or tips or insights from your work with the Enneagram and your coaching for those of us who are interested in the Enneagram or are already using it, but also want to access, I think, a deeper sense of joy and any emotion, I think, that goes along with that?
Hmm. It's such a great question. I really, really appreciate it. And I love how you phrased it as well. Um, Personally, for me, joy comes from an extremely, extremely deep place that is not governed by the ego. And
Mm,
so when the ego is involved, immediately you experience transience, right? So you go from fluctuations of I hate something to I love something. And this is all happening in the mind, because the mind is the faculty that kind of discerns and kind of categorizes and puts things into boxes. But the ego, because it has a function. That
mhm.
function is to protect these identities that um, that we have kind of taken on for ourselves, that have their roles, that have their place, but the ego becomes overly attached to them, right? And that it's that very attachment that prevents us from experiencing joy. And so what's incredible about the Enneagram, and this is something I really appreciate that Enneagram teachers, experts, however you want to call them, I mean, this is the names I think of when I think of the Enneagram, John Riso and Russ Hudson, they speak of is that they say that the Enneagram is there to eventually help us break the ego. It's so they speak of it, there is an important aspect of where we need to have a proper ego formation. We need a healthy ego in order to then break that ego.
Hmm. Practicing non-attachment is hard though.
It is very hard.
Like
Absolutely.
I mean,
And
I'm curious if anyone listening, what your thoughts are. Drop them in the chat too. I just feel like practicing non-attachment, is difficult, especially when you're faced with a level of uncertainty. And I think if anything, though, a gift from this time has been not being attached to an outcome. Because how many concerts did you have scheduled? I had a lot. Like how many plans that you just had to like let go and you had to
right.
release attachment to the physical thing. So then also it's about practicing non-attachment to the emotional too.
Right. And so something that you just brought up now that's super relevant is that I think one of the reasons why all of these swings we've all experienced, myself included, I'm nowhere close to that level of letting the ego die. And that is we've experienced something that I think in our society we haven't really given enough attention to, and that is practicing letting go of identities, right? And that's exactly what this time has forced every single one of us to do. We've had to let
Mm-hmm.
go of identities. We've had to let identities die. And because we have no practice of that, it's been so painful and so difficult. And that is, I feel like it's so unfortunate that we're not taught those things. We're not taught um, how to process those experiences, because it's in that process. What happens is that when you meet people who have learned how to process and let go of not just attachments, when we think of like the material things, but we're talking about like these very intangible, but even more important things when we talk about identities, right? That when you see extremely wise, mature people letting go of identities, in that process, what happens is they start to access joy. And it's incredible. They start to access joy because they realize, I'm so much more than this. These things actually limit me. Yes, they're important, and at times they actually offer me joy, but I'm so much more than this. Actually, at my essence, I am blissful. I am joyful. That is my natural position to be. And every single one of us
This is so good what you just said. When you let go of your identities that you've attached yourself to, that's where the joy comes in. Because I think if I reflect on that, especially in the context of the last year, I think about my identity as a lawyer, my identity as a friend, my identity as the way in which I personally define myself, which is beyond the things that I think as society we attach as labels. And when those things were taken away, like the ability to go to work every day and having to redefine it at home, or, not being able to see, friends, or not having that same emotional security that maybe I had, or we all had, right? A year ago, a sense of safety, I think that was kind of like the rug was ripped up, from underneath. When all those things are taken away and you get down to the core essence of who you are, which is a human being full of kindness and compassion and empathy and doing your best, rather than focusing on the pressure of a label or identity that we put on ourselves, then you can access that joy.
You
I love
can.
what you said. You said it so much better than me, but
Not
that
at
was
all.
so good. And it makes so much sense to me. I'm curious if anyone else who's tuning in, what your thoughts are on that, about accessing joy when you sort of let go of an identity or a pressure to perform a certain way or show up in the world a certain way. Bots and Christine says, totally agree. It's interesting. It's a concept I don't think we've talked enough about in the last year. As like
Yeah.
part of this like world changing is like a shedding of like the way in which we used to operate or identify ourselves in the world too.
Exactly. And what has been happening, I feel, for people is that they're having existential crisis. And that's what happens during an existential crisis. You're starting to question your own existence. And when your existence is based on your identities, then guess what's being called into question? It's the death or the taking on of new identities. I mean, that's happened too. I mean, talk about so many people who are parents working from home. They're now not only working but caregivers all at the same time. I mean, it's a lot for the mind to handle. It's a lot for the ego to handle. But if we could speak about this more, and we could actually speak about the process, not this topic as like a philosophical concept, but how do you practically do this? And that means that you go through all types of emotional states, but at the end, and I think this is something my husband says a lot, and so I want to offer him the credit for this. He says that we often want the results without the process.
Yes.
Right? I mean,
Yes.
how many people? Just,
Please,
go ahead, raise your
hit the
hand.
heart in the corner. This is you too, because like we want the result without going through the process
Yeah,
of getting to it and what comes as part of that. Ooh, that's so
exactly.
good.
And
Your
so
husband is very
because
wise.
he is wise. So I get nuggets of wisdom all the time. I really appreciate it. So because when the emphasis is placed on the result, and when society places emphasis on results, nobody really speaks about the process. It's like this mysterious thing, right? And so then you know you need to go through this. You have no idea how to go through it. And so people do all kinds of things where they try to shove it down, they try to bypass it, they pretend they're okay when they're not. And that isn't healthy because you can't access joy if you just try to shove it away. You have to go through the process in order to be able to access it.
Mm. Go through the process in order to be able to access it. Face the truth underscore LB says, yes, unlearning mindsets and habits that don't serve us is the new normal. 100% agree. But it's the
100%.
journey of that unlearning that is often tough. And I like to say that we can find joy through that process too. I try and bring a
Totally.
little levity to it because I think sometimes when we think about unlearning or shedding a way of thinking or being in the world, we think of it having to be painful, really dramatic, and this
Yeah.
kind of like, like the visual I have sometimes is like an egg that falls off the side of the counter and it splats everywhere, and then you've got to pull it together. Yeah, sometimes things have to break, and fall apart in order to put it back together in a way that is more meaningful and aligned for you. But I think the
Mm-hmm.
process can also be gentle if we choose it to be. And if we welcome
Exactly.
in that level of gentleness for ourselves. So pulling this back in with the Enneagram, if I can,
Yeah.
um, this process of unlearning, this shedding of identities, this letting go of what no longer serves us. If someone is tuning in and they're like, okay, great, I want to do that, but can I do it with the Enneagram? How do you start doing that?
Absolutely. So this is where the Enneagram is actually tailor-made for this, right? So
Mm,
what we're speaking about are ego lenses. When you start to understand your ego lens, what happens is that your ego lens doesn't control you anymore. You're able to control it,
mm,
right? And so also the other thing is that very often we may think we know the identities that we're attached to. And this, once again, is exactly what this pandemic has revealed to so many. We have no clue. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of identities. They can be like micro identities, but we have no clue what kind of pull they have on us. And to be able to really get into that and understand them, see them up front, face to face,
yeah.
is incredibly powerful. So, how can you even start to do this if you have no clue what those identities may be? That's where the Enneagram is powerful. It will show
Mm,
you exactly where to start looking, depending on that ego lens you're built with.
hmm. And I know there are 9 types. So if anyone listening, go ahead, Google it, figure out what your type is if you don't know. If you do know it and you want to share, feel free to do so in the comments. I am a type 3, last time I checked. Super resonates. Wait, have we talked about this, Bryn? Are you also a type 3?
I am. I am.
Okay. All right, soul sister over here.
That's
I know
right.
we're coming towards the end of our time together. If anybody tuning in has a question for us or an additional thought, feel free to drop it in the comments. This has been a really, I think, powerful conversation. I think, viewing how we can continue to take care of ourselves and honor ourselves and our growth, both during this time, but I think in general throughout the remainder of the pandemic, however much longer it's going to be, plus, as we continue to move forward, I think finding ways to take care of ourselves is really important.
Yeah.
Um, Self-care, and I've been talking a lot about this on the podcast, and I'm curious if anyone, you've ran what you think, and then anyone that's listening as well, what you think. I've been thinking a lot about this. Self-care is emotional. Self-care is physical, it's mental, it's spiritual, and often we are neglecting an aspect of our, self-care. Um, and we don't realize it until it's too late, until that
Yeah.
burnout comes or that moment where you're just like, not yourself. And I think we need to find ways to consciously check in with ourselves and say, hey, how am I feeling today? Hey, what do I need? Sometimes it's like, for me, it's like just turning everything off and staring at the ceiling. Like over the weekend, I did a question like, what's your favorite way to self care? And someone who tunes in on our page said, I like to stare at the ceiling. And I was like, oh my God, I feel so seen. Sometimes that's what I need. So looking at
Yeah.
our self-care, I think through the lens of the Enneagram is really powerful. And this focus, like you've been talking about on identity, I think is huge. So thank you for all of this. This has been a really powerful conversation.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you so much. And one thing I'll mention with the Enneagram, just because absolutely it's becoming so popular nowadays, um, please refrain from online tests. Very often they can lead you astray. They're fun to take 100%, but we're talking about motivation, and that's
Mm.
difficult to discern. That's very difficult to
That's very,
discern
very different.
when you have multiple choice, because you might find yourself in the position, even if you go ahead and decide to take it, that I'll pick all of them.
Hmm.
And it's true, depending on the situation, you may pick a variety of answers. So feel free to research, go ahead, read books, attend workshops, or feel free to do an Enneagram consultation. This is something that I do, where you have a one-on-one deep questioning to really determine what your motivation truly is.
Okay, I think you and I are going to need to do that together because now I'm super curious. Because I think a couple years
Totally.
ago, when I first heard or learned about the Enneagram, I think I did an online test. So I was going to ask you, like, where should people go? But I love this idea of diving into books, tuning into workshops, conversations, working with somebody like you where you could kind of really map it out.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of info out there, and sometimes you're like, where do I start to like figure this out?
Yeah. And I mean, it's amazing. It's wonderful that the Enneagram is kind of bursting on into popularity, but as anything bursts into popularity, there is often some sort of dilution, right? So everything kind of gets put into a really nice, tidy box. And
Hmm.
then you lose that, hang on, this isn't about boxes. This is actually about something much deeper.
Hmm. Oh, I love this conversation. Thank you for joining me on Seek the Joy Live. I think, if I could sum up this conversation for anyone that's tuning in now or later or whatever, part of finding your joy through the Enneagram is this process of releasing any identity that is not your own and allowing yourself, I think, to step forward in understanding who you are. And that level of authenticity comes through understanding your preferences and understanding your likes and your dislikes or how you show up in the world. And through that, releasing of that identity, you can tap into greater joy because you remember who you really are. That's my takeaway. So I've loved this. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. I love this conversation. As
Oh,
always, would keep
always.
chatting forever.
I know.
So
I feel like we could keep going, but it's already been a half hour. So
I know.
tell everyone where they can find you. Obviously, we're on Instagram and we'll tag you, but how can they find you, connect with you, work with you, all the good things?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm on Instagram at illuminate.nyc. So please feel free to connect, and I hate to use the word follow, but if you would like to just see what I'm doing, please hit that button.
Hmm.
I'd like to consider it a community as opposed to people following each other. And
Yeah,
along with that, if you'd like to learn more, feel free to DM me, or else you can also visit my website, which is www.illuminate.nyc.
perfect. We'll include everything at the bottom of the Instagram live when I post this. I almost said the show
Awesome.
notes, but there are no show notes. This is an Instagram live.
That's
Everything will go on Instagram, and I agree. I think it's about cultivating a sense of community, and you do such a beautiful job of that. And everyone, check out Vrin's page. There's tons of great um, Enneagram information, and you are constantly sharing from your own life and your own perspective, which I think is really beautiful. So thank you. This was so much fun.
Thank you. Thank
All right,
you.
guys, thank you for coming to our Seek the Joy Live. This is our new Instagram Live series that we are doing once a month, maybe sometimes twice a month. We'll see how it goes. If you have any topic ideas or things that you want to see, please feel free to send me a DM. And thank you for being here, tuning in. If you were taking your lunch break with me, I appreciate it. And thank you, Vrin, and we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. And thank you to everybody who joined us.
Oh, no, you went out. What did you say?
Oh, no. I said thank you to everybody who joined us.
Yes. Oh my God. Thank you so much. I mean, I have loved just watching old people come in and have this conversation with us and share their perspective in the comments. So super grateful. I'm super grateful. All right, guys, I'm going to end it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And any additional thoughts on the Enneagram and Joy, feel free to comment on this video once it's posted. Let's
Please
keep the
do.
conversation going.
Awesome.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.